Hi, I welcome you all in YuktMind's unique initiative of 10 minutes and newspaper done. In this video, we'll be covering 7th July's The Hindu newspaper. You can download the PDF of these news from our website www.yuktmind.com under the current affairs tab. Or also you can download the PDF from our Telegram channel, the link of which is given in description below. Let's get started. So, in this video, we'll be covering 7 news, starting with dark patterns, high seas treaty, a man being urinated upon in MP, internationalizing the rupee, reforms to increase FDI, internet shutdowns, and finally, deep tech engineers. So, the first news, the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Advertising Standards Council of India, that is ASCI, recently held a joint consultation with stakeholders on the menace of dark patterns. The ASCI has come up with guidelines for the same, with the central government also working towards norms against dark patterns. So, what are the dark patterns? Harry Brignall, a user experience researcher in the UK, introduced the phrase dark pattern in 2010 to characterize deceptive strategies used to trick clients. So, a dark pattern refers to a design or user interface technique that is intentionally crafted to manipulate or deceive users into making certain choices or taking specific actions that may not be in their best interest. For example, a common dark pattern is a sneak into basket technique used on e commerce websites. That is, when a user adds an item to their shopping cart, a dark pattern may be employed by automatically adding additional items to the cart without the user's explicit consent or clear notification. Similarly, many of us have encountered pop up requests for personal information, where we have found it difficult to locate the reject link. So, there are different types of dark patterns, such as creating a sense of urgency or scarcity while online shopping. Confirm shaming, wherein a consumer is criticized for not conforming to a particular belief. The forced action of signing up for a service to access content. Advertising one product or service but delivering another, often of lower quality, known as the bait and switch technique. Hidden costs, where the bill is revised or costs are added when the consumer is almost certain to purchase the product. Disguised advertisements of a particular product by way of depicting it as news, and many more. So, such deceptive patterns that manipulate consumer choice and impede their right to be well informed constitute unfair practices that are prohibited under the Consumer Protection Act of 2019. So, are dark patterns illegal? The legality of dark patterns is a complex matter as distinguishing between manipulation and fraudulent intent can be challenging. As of now, there are no specific regulations in place in most nations against dark patterns. So, what are global regulators saying on dark patterns? Major international authorities are acting and formulating rules to address the issue. In a letter to UK businesses, the Competition and Markets Authority, that is CMA of the UK, lists different pressure selling techniques that the CMA believes would likely violate consumer protection laws and for which action will be taken. Similarly, guidelines from the European Data Protection Board were released in the year 2022 and offer designers and users of social media platforms practical guidance on how to spot and avoid so called dark patterns in social media interfaces that are in violation of general data protection regulation laws. So, how do we address dark patterns? The Department of Consumer Affairs and the ASCI have identified the issue and recently taken certain steps to handle the same. As of now, companies are being asked to desist from using such tactics in the e market. However, with the growing use of e platforms, a robust legal mechanism is a demand. To do this, new rules aimed against deceptive design practices may need to be introduced along with updated consumer protection laws and data protection legislation. So, the second news. On 19th June, the UN adopted the Marine Biodiversity of Areas Beyond National Jurisdiction, or the High Seas Treaty. It became the third agreement to be approved under UN clause after the 1994 and 95 treaties, which established the International Seabed Authority and the Fish Stocks Agreement. The treaty's objective is to implement international regulations to protect life in oceans beyond national jurisdiction through international cooperation. So, what does the treaty entail? The treaty aims to address critical issues such as the increasing sea surface temperatures, overexploitation of marine biodiversity, overfishing, coastal pollution, and unsustainable practices beyond national jurisdiction. The first step is establishing marine protected areas to protect oceans from human activities through a three-quarterly majority vote, which prevents their decision from getting blocked by one or two parties. On the fair sharing of benefits from marine genetic resources, the treaty mandates sharing of scientific information and monetary benefits through installing a clear house mechanism. Through the mechanism, information on marine protected areas, marine genetic resources, and area based management tools will be open to access for all parties. So, this is to bring transparency and boost cooperation. The last pillar of the treaty is capacity building and marine technology. The scientific and technical body will also play a significant role in environmental impact assessment. The body will be creating standards and guidelines for assessment procedures and helping countries with less capacity in carrying out assessments. This will facilitate the conference of parties to trace future impacts, identify data gaps, and bring out research priorities. So, why did it take so long to sign the treaty? The marine genetic resources issue was the treaty's most contended element. So, the parties to the treaty must share and exchange information on marine protected areas and technical, scientific, and area based management tools to ensure open access of knowledge. The negotiations on the subject were prolonged due to the absence of a provision to monitor information sharing. In Intergovernmental Conference 2, small island states supported the idea of having a licensing scheme for monitoring, but was opposed by the likes of US and Russia, stating its notification system would hinder bioprospective research. Another debate was over definition. The use of the phrases promote or ensure in different parts of the treaty, especially with respect to the sharing of benefits from marine genetic resources, was heavily debated over. And finally, there was the prolonged negotiation over the adjacency issue. This was specifically applicable to coastal states whose national jurisdictions over the seas may vary. This meant it required special provisions where it can exercise sovereign rights over seabed and subsoil in the jurisdictions beyond. It prolonged the decision making as it affects the interest of landlocked and distant states. In essence, it meant that island nations were demanding larger areas beyond their national jurisdictions, whereas landlocked countries were at loss due to their geography of being landlocked. The third news: a video in which a man can be seen urinating on a tribal laborer had triggered widespread outrage on social media. The police arrested the accused Pravesh Shukla. The fourth news: the government's announcement of a long term roadmap for further internationalization of rupee can turn out to be a positive exercise. So let us read about the impediments in internationalization of rupee. The demonetization of 2016 shook confidence in the Indian rupee, especially in Bhutan and Nepal. The move in 2023 to withdraw the rupees 2000 note has also impacted confidence in the rupee, and there is very little international demand for rupee. The rupee is far from being internationalized. The daily average share for the rupee in global foreign exchange market hovers around 1.6%, while India's share of global goods trade is around 2%. India has taken some steps to promote the internationalization of the rupee, for example, enable external commercial borrowings in rupees, with the push to Indian banks to open rupee Vostro accounts for banks from Russia, the UAE, Sri Lanka, Mauritius, and measures to trade with 18 countries in rupees instituted. However, such transactions have been limited, with India still buying oil from Russia in dollars. For a currency to be considered a reserve currency, the rupee needs to be fully convertible, readily usable, and available in sufficient quantities. India does not permit, as of now, full capital account convertibility, that is, allowing free movement of local financial investment assets into foreign assets and vice versa. With significant concerns on the exchange of its currency with others, driven by past fears of capital flight, that is, outflow of capital from India due to monetary policies or lack of growth, and exchange rate volatility given significant current and capital account deficits. So, China's example in internationalizing the renminbi has lessons. Post the year 2008, China pursued a phased approach, enabling the use of the RMB for trade and finance, that is, financial instruments for facilitating international trade and commerce, investment, and over the long term as a reserve currency. So, many reforms can be pursued to internationalize the rupee. It must be made more freely convertible with a goal of full convertibility by 2060, letting financial investments move freely between India and abroad. Additionally, the RBI should pursue a deeper and more liquid rupee bond market, enabling foreign investors and Indian trade partners to have more investment options in rupees and enabling its international use. Indian exporters and importers should be encouraged to invoice their transactions in rupee, that is, optimizing the trade settlement formalities for rupee import export transactions would go a long way. Additional currency swap agreements, for example, as with Sri Lanka, would further allow India to settle trade and investment transactions in rupees without resorting to a reserve currency such as the dollar. Additionally, tax incentives to foreign businesses to utilize the rupee in operations in India would also help. The RBI and the Ministry of Finance may ensure currency management stability, that is, consistent and predictable issuance or retrieval of notes and coins, and improve the exchange rate regime. The Tarapur committees in 1997 and 2006 recommendations must be pursued, including a push to reduce fiscal deficits lower than 3.5%, a reduction in gross inflation rate to 3 to 5%, and reduction in gross banking non performing assets to less than 5%. The fifth news. The Finance Ministry has made a strong pitch for measures to facilitate foreign direct investment flows that dipped last year and may remain subdued in the coming months. Blaming the dip in FDI inflows in financial year 23 to inflationary pressures and tighter monetary policies, the ministry noted that FDI inflows may also be impacted by political distance more than geographical distances, as geopolitics has dominated geography. So, according to Finance Ministry, this was not unique to India, as net FDI inflows to emerging market economies declined 36% in the year 2022. Friendshoring of FDI by increasing investments in countries which are geopolitically aligned to each other was leading to a fragmentation in FDI flows across the globe, according to Finance Ministry, citing research from the International Monetary Fund, that is IMF. So, what needs to be done? Last mile infrastructure issues, labor availability, and measures to facilitate larger capacity creation will be needed. Let us now discuss a UPSC Civil Services examination, that is prelims previous year question asked in the year 2020. With reference to foreign direct investment in India, which one of the following is considered its major characteristic? The option A is it is investment through capital instruments, essentially in a listed company. Option B is it is largely non debt creating capital flow. Option C is it is investment which involves debt servicing. Option D is it is investment made by foreign institutional investors in government securities. The correct answer is option B, which is it is a largely non-debt creating capital flow. The sixth news. Over the past few years, the Indian government has increasingly been trying to control law and order by shutting access to the internet, whether in Jammu and Kashmir, Manipur, or Punjab. So between 2016 and 2022, 60% of internet shutdowns across the world took place in India. So, why do state and district administrations take recourse to internet shutdowns, and why do they do this so often? For around 40 to 50% of them, the official reason is communal tensions. Some of them are imposed during protests, many to prevent cheating during exams, and many due to religious processions. Preventive shutdowns are imposed before an event takes place. A reactive shutdown is imposed after an event takes place and is generally the easiest way to control an escalating law and order situation. So, how can the interests of people who are reliant on the internet be balanced with maintaining law and order? Article 19 of the Constitution mentions freedom of speech and freedom to practice any profession. Article 21 protects the right to life and liberty, which also encompasses the right to education and the right to exercise one's freedom to access the internet. The Supreme Court has held in various decisions, including in Anuradha Bhasin and Fahim Shireen cases, that access to internet has to be preserved. Shutdown should be exercised only in situations which require exceptional control and surveillance. So, when a shutdown can occur and when it cannot. The Information Technology Act of 2000 maintains that threats to national sovereignty or integrity or defense calls for website blocking. Accordingly, we have rules setting out safeguards for website blocking. Then there are the temporary suspension of telecom services, public emergency or public safety rules of 2017. The Home Secretary has the power to decide on shutdowns, and the review takes place in a committee. And any challenge is decided by the appropriate court. So, what are the problems with protracted shutdowns? Nobody below the level of a joint secretary can impose a shutdown, but often district magistrates end up imposing blanket shutdowns. A lot of businesses and livelihoods depend on the internet today. Rule 5 of the temporary suspension rule says that a review committee has to be formed within 5 working days of issue of directions for suspension of services. But little information is available about such review committees in public domain. The final news of the day. India will require an additional pool of at least 20 lakh deep tech engineers by 2030 to meet its growth aspirations for the semiconductor and electronic design manufacturing sectors, according to K. Krishnamurthy, CEO and President, India Electronics and Semiconductor Association. Deep technology or hard tech is a classification of organizations, or more typically startup companies, with the express objective of providing technology solutions based on substantial scientific or engineering challenges. Thank you for watching this video. You can download the PDF of these news from our website www.yuktmind.com under current affairs tab. Or also you can download the PDF from our Telegram channel, the link of which is given in description below. Thank you.